What's up, everybody? Dr. V here. I wanted to talk about something that's unique and kind of out of series and what I've been talking about. So, if you've watched my other videos, I've been sticking to talking about how to start your business correctly and how to grow your business and make money, right? Well, I want to tell my story and how my diagnosis with ADHD actually helped me make even more money, which you might not think is possible, but I would disagree. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so now that all the disclaimers are out of the way, let me kind of dive into my story. So, I've always been hyperactive. I've always been extremely impulsive since I was a kid, right? But I was just a hyper kid. And I grew up during a time when, we didn't just automatically throw medical diagnosis and labels on things. So, whatever. I went into the military. And while I was in the military, I really got to get a real control over my symptoms. I had to, right? Even though I was extremely impulsive and hyperactive, when you have to stand at attention for hours, you figure it out, right? So anyway, from there, finished, I got out of the military and I noticed, I'm like, you know what? Let me just go to the doctor and see if it actually is ADHD or if I am just hyper. I am just a hyper person. And if you haven't been able to tell by my other videos, that is very possibly also the case. Anyway, I went to the doctor and I got diagnosed with ADHD. I told my doctor exactly my symptoms and I said, I feel like it's some sort of like ADHD type thing. She sent me for testing. Lo and behold, I have ADHD. Now, in reviewing my testing and my diagnosis with my doctor, her and I both agreed that I have a really good handle on things and there was no need for me to take any medication. Now, that is not always the case, so this is just my story. I'm not telling you not to take medication. I'm just saying that my doctor didn't think I needed any, and I agreed with her. So my ADHD decided to kick in the middle of me opening all of these businesses. Side note, it didn't kick in. It's always been there. I know that now. But I began to open up a variety of different businesses, right? Every time I had a new idea, I was opening up a new business. And I'm saying, like, I would have the idea at 9 a.m. in the morning. I'd sit on it for a day, tops. I'd write the business plan and start the business in that day. And when I say start the business, I mean I'm filing for LLCs, I'm filing for DBAs, I'm patenting, I'm looking at patent lawyers, I'm looking at trademark lawyers, and I was just all over the place, right? And after many successes and many failures, I realized, I have really good ideas. What's the plan? So what I decided to do was every time I had a grand idea, right? Anytime my ADHD impulsed me to think of something else, I was like, oh, this is a good business. This is a good business, right? I would write it down. And I started writing them down on Post-it notes. And in my office, I have a wall of ideas. And I would just put these Post-it notes up. Now, I would move on, obviously, very quickly from that idea to a new idea. So as you can imagine, this wall is covered in Post-it notes. But every now and then, I would come back to something. Like, for example, if I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start an ice cream store in the desert, right? And this is not a real thing, but this is just an example. I'd write it down on a Post-it note, put the Post-it note on the wall, leave it alone. Every now and then, after cycling through 100 different ideas and putting 100 different Post-it notes up, I'd come back to a random idea that I had. And what I would do is I would add to that Post-it note. And I ended up working out a system where, there would be one bullet and that's the idea. And I would look at the Post-it notes that I would go back to, the ones that had multiple bullets on them. And I'm like, okay, these might be actually worth looking into. So I take the Post-it notes and I set a level for myself, which was 4. If I went back to that idea 4 times, which, sometimes wasn't really long, it was like a month, I'd go back to that idea 4 times, or sometimes it was a year. But I would take that Post-it note and set it aside and put it with a whole other set of Post-it notes. So I would have one wall of 100 Post-it notes and then another wall of maybe 10. And every time I would return to one of those ideas, I would really consider, opening up this business. When I got to 6 bullets under that idea, 6 additional ideas I had for that business, then I would start to do some research. I would start the initial part and the initial phasing of a business plan, the initial research, the market research and analysis. Is this a viable idea? And then from there, if it was a viable idea, then that idea would go in a notepad and I would start to form that business. Now, I didn't always start those businesses. Sometimes those businesses already existed, and I would see, is there a way for me to make this better? If there wasn't a way for me to make this better and the idea already existed, archived, right? And what I would end up doing is typing up everything that I found during my market research, and I have an archive for all my old ideas. Now, if you have ADHD, this sounds like too much work probably, or you're thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to focus. But that's the best part. I didn't focus on anything. There's not a single thing that I focused on. I would just, every time I got a random idea, I'd be eating dinner, all of a sudden I thought of a business idea that I thought of, 6 months ago. This new concept for this business would come into my mind. And I'm like, oh, I thought about it, an ice cream shop in the desert. I have an idea for that. And, something else would come up, how am I going to get the ice cream out there without melting? Or, what's my electric bill going to be? And I'd have all these different ideas and I would just put them back on a Post-it note. And that was really a good way for me to filter things out, but to create a system that worked for me with how my ADHD manifested itself. And I bet you're thinking, well, if you're not thinking, I hope you're thinking, how many Post-its did you actually, how many viable ideas did you have? And that is a good question. The answer to your question is 17. So out of probably 100 Post-it notes when I first started, and bringing maybe about 30 of them to phase 2, we'll call it, I ended up pulling 17, right? So a little over half of those ideas. And what I ended up doing was either selling the idea, trademarking it, doing any of those things to protect it and own it, and then making money off of it. And that process I will get into in a completely separate video series. But I kind of wanted to tell my story and just let you guys know that, hey, I had ADHD, and a lot of my clients, a lot of my newer clients are like, I can't focus on one thing. You want me to sit down and make a business plan, and I just can't do it. And my reply and my response to you is, you can do it. You just have to find the system that works for you. Just because you've been told something and you have this, a warehouse of symptoms does not mean that you can't be successful and you can't do something good for yourself. So regardless of what it is, sit down and think about ways to work with whatever you have, right? Find out, how can I achieve my goals while also, working with, for me, ADHD. And I just found a way to have my ADHD and how it manifests itself for me complement my ideas and make me money. So that was just my heartfelt, story, I guess, for you guys to hopefully relate to, and that it motivates you. Just because you have whatever doesn't mean you can't be successful.